Hello, today is January 20th, 2024. We're in the house of David and Ginger Vujic, who are our hosts. And good afternoon, David and Ginger.
Good afternoon.
We will be talking about many different things, but Bog se javi, God revealed himself.
Thank you.
Indeed, he has revealed himself.
So, David, can we start with you? Can you tell us your story, starting with the childhood through your education, early work, and we will start with that.
I was born and raised in a very small western Pennsylvania community of Midland, which is 30-some miles north and west of Pittsburgh. I was fortunate enough that both my mother and father were very religious. My father was heavily involved in a number of Serbian organizations, to include being one of the very early organizers of our church community. He contributed a great deal towards the future of our church community. We belonged to the Serbian National Federation, to Jedinstvo, and several other Serbian organizations. I belonged to the Dr. Laza Kostić Choir in Midland. We, unfortunately, during that very early period in the early 40s and after the war, we didn't have a church. We usually had a priest come to town and conduct liturgy in the hall in the Serbian club. And then shortly after the Second World War, our church board was looking for a priest to assist us in bringing our community together. It was shortly after 1946 or 47. Our church organization brought a priest in from a displaced persons camp, and the priest was originally from Šibenik, a delightful gentleman by the name of Father Milorad Dobrota. Father Dobrota was an outstanding scholar. He was an architect, he was a composer and a writer, and we were overwhelmingly fortunate to have him in our community. He was also a disciplinarian. You never came to church 1 minute after 10 o'clock. When he'd turn around and see you walking in, and he would look at you and he would say, "Da fali sat." And of course, he would embarrass people, but make them aware of the importance of being on time to spend that time with the Lord. He made no bones about it. He was a disciplinarian with respect to fasting. Disciplinarian with respect to when you're fasting, you don't go to basketball games, you don't go to dances, and you don't do all of these, delightful things that you enjoy on a daily basis. Lent is a very important, if you will, ritual within our community. And he wanted everybody to know that you had to abide, if you will, by the rules of the fast, of which we all did. There was a time when the churches in our area used to call us the most holy Serbian Orthodox church in the region, because we were very fortunate in having Father Dobrota as our religious leader. He's the one that designed the iconostasis of our church in Midland. He was the one that gained access to all of the necessary support to building our church in Midland. That was in the late 40s. Interestingly enough, I think he came there in 1947. In 1949, we were laying a cornerstone of our church. 2 years later, in 1954, we built the church, I think, or 55. And it was an incredible accomplishment in such a short period of time. Understand, too, that the community of Midland was overwhelmed with Serbian families. We had up to 550 Serbian families in our community. So everybody knew who we were. We had most of the people in that small town celebrated all of our holidays with us. It was an incredible experience. I was very fortunate to have been part of that environment growing up, where I went to Serbian school. I learned a little more of the Serbian language. I learned a little more of Ćirilicu. I sang in our choirs. I began playing tamburica music when I was a kid. But for the most part, we learned most of that as a result of the very dedicated Father Dobrota, who wanted us to know about Serbian history, customs, traditions, folklore, and faith. And so therefore, he instilled in me throughout my entire life the importance of who I am as a Serbian Orthodox Christian. It was very important to me. Later on, as I graduated from school, I went on to college, and my first number of college years, I was studying music. I was studying music education and classical composition. And while I was in school, in an attempt to further allow funds to help me pay my way through school, because during the summer months I was working in the steel mills. But nevertheless, I was fortunate enough to have been selected in reserve officers training course in college. And then later on, I became commissioned in the Air Force and was selected for pilot training. And so for several years, I flew in the Air Force. And upon conclusion, I went to, I was unfortunately subjected to an accident that had an impact on my continuing as an aviator, and I decided then to separate from the military because I was no longer qualified nor eligible to fly after that moment. But I had a dear friend of mine introduced me to a company in California called North American Aviation, and they had a program called the Corporate Executive Management Program organization that brought in potential corporate executives to learn about the company and its various divisions and its various capabilities. So I was on that program for several years, and I worked for the electronics division. And shortly thereafter, I was asked to move to our space division, where I became a member of the Apollo Space Launch team. During that period, that was back in the early 60s. During that period, I was fortunate enough to have befriended a number of other Serbs who were heavily involved, and one in particular, Milo Kovucilic, who was the chief engineer on the Apollo spacecraft program. And Mike and I became very close friends. And then we came together with other Serbs who were on the program. There were 7 of us, and all of which contributed significantly to the success of the Apollo moon landing. I went to, several years ago, I was invited by the State Department to travel to Belgrade during the anniversary, 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon landing, to brief Serbian colleges, schools, government offices on the Apollo spacecraft and the program, which was very enlightening. And rest assured, I was fortunate enough to have met some very impressive people. And later, as a result, I took the time to introduce all of the audience to the American Serbs who contributed considerably to the program, which may have had no idea. And I always left a presentation, if I'm briefing people at a school for exceptional children or the University of Belgrade or the general public, I'd always end by saying, I'm an American Serb, but I feel that it's important that you all are aware of what we as American Serbs have contributed to this program. And I'm very proud as an American Serb to have been part of this program And I just want you all to know that I want to share this pride with the Serbian people here in Serbia. And that sort of turned everything around, because then all of a sudden I was called to President Vucic's office, and I spent some time with him, and then he awarded me, if you will, the Medal of Freedom shortly thereafter. And I had just a great experience of meeting some wonderful people while we were there. You know, we went to Saborna on several occasions. We met with the patriarch, spent some time with him, enjoyed being in his company. We went also to Sveti Sava. It wasn't completed at the time, but nevertheless, I was overwhelmed. But getting back to my early days after I left the Apollo and the airplane program, I was working for a company where I was involved in the design, development, and the sale of sophisticated aircraft for their military, for their, flight inspection, for their executive transport. And I'd had offices just about everywhere in the world. And in every case where I had an office, I always looked for an Orthodox church. One that stands out mostly is when I had an office in Tokyo, in Japan. I wanted to visit the Orthodox cathedral in Tokyo that is referred to as Nikoraido, which is obviously the translation of St. Nicholas. So I went to the cathedral. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I was fortunate enough to have witnessed the ordination of 15 additional Japanese Orthodox priests. And as the bishop came out, I was obviously very anxious to hear the liturgy in Japanese, but the bishop came out and he started, Paki Paki Milo Господу Помо. I said, that's not Japanese. I was a little confused by that. But as they were coming out, there was a priest who was in front, and he was the dean of the cathedral. And he looked at me and he put up his thumb. And I knew him from California because he was an Orthodox priest in Garden Grove, California, and we were good friends. So I met with him thereafter at the parish house, and he said, David, that was a kind of a stupid question coming from a Serbian Orthodox end of the spectrum. That the language of the church is Slavonic, and it may change in some churches, but not many. But nevertheless, I had the opportunity to go to Orthodox churches in Montreal, for example, and I found that the First Lady, Mileva Pivinichki's father was a benefactor to the church in Montreal. I spent some time looking for Orthodox churches when I was in the military, especially during Easter, Christmas. Found a small Orthodox church in Newcastle, Wyoming, because I was stationed in South Dakota. But nevertheless, I always looked for a place to worship. When I was stationed in Omaha, Nebraska, I was a member of the St. Nicholas Serbian Orthodox Church in Omaha, and I sang in their choir. And Father Dusanovich was the parish priest at the time. He and I became very close friends. Father Dusanovich was also a professor at the University of Omaha, the campus there for University of Nebraska. When I relocated to California, I became a member of St. Stephen's Orthodox Church. I was, again, a member of the St. Stephen's Choir. I attended all of the festivities. I ended up playing at a number of the festivities at the cathedral. I played with the Tamburica group. I played the contrabass. But in every case where I've had an opportunity to show my commitment and my dedication to my Serbian Orthodox belief, I always look for the Serbian Orthodox Church. Getting back just a few years, I met Ginger on Capitol Hill, and she was working for a member of Congress at the time from Ohio, and she spent over 30 years in the Congress, later became the director of the St. Lawrence Seaway. And when we came together, I was overwhelmed and thanked the Lord for bringing Ginger into my life. And I asked her to marry me, and she said no. And I said, well, I understand it's rather abrupt and early in our relationship, but I said I'd appreciate it if we'd continue enjoying each other as we have. And just so you know, I will not ask you again. So 3 years later,
I got down on one knee and asked you to marry me. And you said yes.
so we got married in the church on 16th Street many years ago. Father Milisha was the priest. And we had a very short period of time to prepare for our wedding, but we had people come in from California, from Texas, from Florida, from New Jersey. And it was just a delight, and I thank the Lord every day for that wonderful day that we spent. And of course, Ginger asked Father Milisha for the short English version of the liturgy, and of course he got the long Serbian version.
He's very proud of that.
But in the meantime, several years later, they were very close to chatting about going to some event in El Equipa, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And then finally we drove up to El Equipa, and lo and behold, Ginger had committed herself to being baptized in the Serbian Orthodox Church. Father Stepanov and baptized her in El Equipa, and Father Milisha was her cum. And at that point in time, my heart exploded. I was just overwhelmed that she made that commitment for me, not only for me, but the fact that she enjoyed so much the Orthodox ritual. She enjoyed being in the midst of our people. She enjoys our customs and traditions and folklore. Coming from a Southern Baptist background, the transition was exactly 180 degrees. But she's been very dedicated. She prepares for our Slava. She prepares for our Easter and our Christmas. There were times in this condo in our home we'd had anywhere from 40 people here. In our other home, I would barbecue a pig and I would make the sadama, and we'd have people down there that never heard about what a Serb was, and all of a sudden they were just overwhelmed by all of this wonderful food and this Serbian Orthodox ritual celebrating Christmas and Easter. There were a few occasions when Father Milisha came down, to bless the home during the holidays. But in every case where we've had an opportunity to enjoy, if you will, the environment of our Eastern Orthodox faith, we take advantage of it. And just recently, a little less than a year ago, Ginger and I were in Belgrade for a month, and all of a sudden they were preparing for Ginger and I to renew our vows at St. Sava, which was an incredible experience. To be in that absolutely gorgeous edifice, it was a dream come true. They had the Orthodox choir there, St. Sava choir there, but amazingly enough, Ginger and I were standing in front of the door, the entrance of the cathedral, and I was being interviewed by several groups, and there was a group of people standing to our right, and all of a sudden they broke out into song and singing Mnoga Leta. I was overwhelmed by that. And then Ginger says, "David, that's Yelena over there directing the choir." I said, you mean from our church? She said, yes. So I looked around, I recognized a lot of the people. And it just so happened the Serbian Singing Federation was there at the same time, and they all came over and hugged. I knew most of the people. My only regret was because it was a political set of circumstances, I couldn't I couldn't invite them to the wedding because I wanted them to be with me. And they refused. They said, we haven't got much room. However, we
They were
overcome that. We were just overwhelmingly just happy about all of what had happened. And the priests were very cordial. And they gave me a Serbian Orthodox cross as a gift, and they gave us icons and what have you. And it was just an experience to end all experiences. If you look at it in terms of, a dream come true, to at least return to my father's fatherland, and to have been, taken our wedding vows in the middle of Serbia. I can see, and I saw when I was there, my mother and father sobbing in delight. But more importantly, Ginger and I were just overwhelmed by everyone's kindness. We had Novak Djokovic, and his father was there with us, and he spent the day with us at the church. There were several other prominent Serbs from the government who attended. But the most important thing was that we had an opportunity to have been in that environment of one of the most glorious Orthodox cathedrals in the world. It was an incredible experience. And when you walk in to the cathedral, and the body of the cathedral is, you immediately feel the aura of heaven. It was incredible. And we were so overwhelmed. And as you can imagine, we cried a lot. But so looking at it in terms of our commitment to our faith, we've been very fortunate because our faith has been very good to us. We have a great deal of respect to those who are committed to our customs and our traditions and our folklore and our faith. We have made in the past every attempt possible to promote and to further see those types of programs materialize within our communities. I feel very good about my attempts to at least make a difference. I never forced myself on anybody, nor did I invite myself to somebody else's party. But I was always asked to become a part of similar type programs over the years, in which I'm just overwhelmingly delighted. And there have been times when it's been very difficult for me at my age to move about and whatever have you. But all of what we've experienced, both Ginger and I, was very rewarding. And we thank our dear Lord every day. And we want to convey also to not only the parishioners of St. Luke's, but Father Vasily, and just make him aware how grateful both Ginger and I are of what he has accomplished at St. Luke's. He is a very committed gentleman. He's done an outstanding job in improving, if you will, the environment of our church, and more importantly, improving, if you will, the population. He has been an outstanding religious leader in our community, one that was desperately in need over the years, and he has been the right combination to bring us together. And for that, we are very grateful.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing these moments where you could, there's no coincidence as life, as Father Vasily says, and I truly believe that our Serbian Singing Federation choir was at the same time, at the same place. You could have missed each other, not just by the day, but by minute.
Yeah.
And it all happened at the same time for them to be there for you. So that's wonderful. How about when you were growing up? Did you go through a rebellious phase as a young kid of maybe there's God, maybe there isn't, maybe I will do whatever I like? Can you share that?
A rebellious phase?
Yeah, like, so usually kids are small, parents take them to the church, they go, they pray, they believe in God, and then they kind of go through this phase of they start questioning things, and at some point they basically have to start believing for themselves. Have
Never.
You haven't.
I never
had that?
experienced that. My father was a very committed, dedicated to our church and to our church community. And even when I was a youngster, running around playing basketball or football or baseball or whatever have you during the week and during the weekends, and I laid there in bed sleeping, he'd come and throw water on me. He said, "It's time to go to church." And I'd say, "Well, Dad, I got in late last night." He said, "I understand. I don't care about that. You need to thank the Lord for the fact that you had a good week, and you need to thank Him every week. Get up." So that was his response. So I really never had any concern about my commitment. I enjoyed the church. I enjoyed going to church. I enjoyed responding to the liturgy in the choir. I was one of Father Dobrata's first altar boys, so I became more involved, if you will, in the mechanics of the church. It made me more aware of the importance of what the ritual represented, those types of things. So, no, I never was in any way, shape, or form rebellious.
Okay. How about when you were, for the several years that you were pilot? Does that bring you closer to God when you're flying these super speeds and whatever physical and mental state you're in? Does it bring you closer to God, or there's no time to think about it?
Well, you know, there are a number of us who, when you finally lock yourself in your cockpit, there are a number of us who recognize the value of a prayer prior to takeoff. You pray that your flight will be safe. You pray that the Lord is watching over you to see to it that all of your decisions are decided in concert with your beliefs, those types of things. So I've always found it necessary to take the time and recognize that I'm in an environment here that is very sophisticated, technically, and I need to take a few minutes to at least ask for the Lord to protect me from any harm in this environment that I'm committing myself to. I'll give you another perfect example. I have several photographs over there of a gentleman by the name of Major General Mile Vojvodic. Mile was from around Steubenville, Ohio, originally. He was a test pilot in the Air Force. He flew one of the fastest aircraft ever developed in the history of aviation, fly three times the speed of sound. And he told me, he says, every time that he buckled up, he said, I had to do one of those Molitwas, or I never knew if I was going to make it back. So you need to understand that, yeah, there are those of us, I think, especially, you know, those of us in the military of our Orthodox religion have a special, if you will, place and recognize the importance of our Lord. And give me that book for just a minute, Jen. I want to show you something interesting. When I was first going into the military, we're all, you know, being preparing for our, what they call dog tags, or our identification tags. I received mine, and I said on the bottom there was an O. And I asked one of my officers, I said, what is the designation of the O? He said, that's religion. I said, what's the O represent? He said, other. I said, I'm not an other. I said, I'm Eastern Orthodox. He says, well, that's other. I said, no, it's not to me. So I went to our chaplain, who happened to be Orthodox chaplain on the base. I said, they put an O in here and said it's other. I said, Father, is there something we can do about this? He said, we'll do it. He said, we'll get yours changed. So I have the only maybe one of very few on the dog tag that says Eastern Orthodox. Look on the bottom.
That's right. Beautiful. We'll,
So anyhow, those are just some of the examples of what my commitment and our commitment to the importance of our religion. I mean, Ginger knows when we're preparing for our Slava, for example. She knows it's Veliki Post, and she knows that we don't eat nothing. She prepares for Post, prepares for Christmas Eve, everything.
by the way, your Slava is when?
Kristofdan, that's the 27th September. Yeah,
London.
that's So, but nevertheless, we continue, and I'm just so overwhelmingly delighted. And more importantly, I thank the Lord every day for bringing Ginger into my life, because I didn't ask her to become an Orthodox Christian. I didn't ask her if she wanted to get married in a Serbian church. She did it because she enjoyed it, and she wanted to be with me, and we enjoyed it together.
Ginger, could you share with us your feelings and your emotions and what led you to convert to Orthodoxy? Just whatever you can share, that would be great.
Well, I grew up as a Southern Baptist, and definitely I am a woman of tremendous faith. Growing up as a Southern Baptist, it's really, you spend a lot of time in church. On Sunday morning, there's Sunday school in church, and Sunday night, there's training union in church. And on Monday, we had Girls Auxiliary, which was totally a religious-related program. On Wednesday, we had prayer meeting. On Friday, we had Youth for Christ. And then we started again on Sunday. And of course, all during the summers, we had Bible school. So I grew up that way. When I met David, I was introduced to the Orthodox religion. And it's difficult in the beginning to comprehend. It's different. The language is different. But I asked a lot of questions, and I got a lot of answers. And I enjoyed it. Then when David and I decided to get married, he said, we can get married, in the church, in your church, my church, on the street corner, I don't care. Let's just get married. And I said, I want to get married in the Orthodox Church. And at the time, I did not have to commit to anything. I had to write a letter to the bishop. At that time, it was Bishop Christopher.
Yeah.
And tell him that I was a baptized Christian, which I was. And I found this interesting, too, because, in a Catholic church, you make that kind of commitment, and you have to raise your children, commit to that.
Okay.
And no, it was, all I had to say is that I am a baptized Christian. He wrote back and said, you're good, you're fine. So we were married in the Orthodox Church, as you know now, by Father Milasha. And he's been there for me to answer all my questions forever. We have a very, very close relationship. He and his wife Vera and their children. I mean, when they were small kids, they were tearing up our house. We had, at our home on the river, we had a Labor Day celebration party. And we had a couple coming in from Cleveland, Ohio, and they knew Milasha because he had been a priest there. So I decided I would invite Milasha and Vera to come down and and I didn't tell them that the other couple was coming, and I didn't tell the other couple that Vera and Milisha were going to be there. And so it was really nice. But one of our guests, Rick Zivic, asked Milisha, and I overheard this, did Ginger ever join the church? And I'm in another room, but my hearing is excellent. I heard it, and Milisha said, no, she never did. But she's involved. You know, she helps out Serbian sisters, you know, and she, you know, they attend. She never joined. I let it go. I didn't say anything. So we get home on Tuesday. The first phone call is, Milisha, what do you mean I don't, you know? He said, well, you never, you know, you weren't baptized. You don't belong. And I go, dang, you know. Okay, what do I need to do?
No, she said, I got married for 2.5 hours and I'm not a member
And
of
I'm
the church.
not, you know, come on. I did, but I was going to leave that part out. So he said, okay, let's meet. And we had lunch, and he brought me the catechism book, and you got to start studying this. And I read and had questions along the way, and call him, he'd answer. And we had a couple meetings, you know, during that time that I'd write down my questions. And in fact, I still have the book. I still have all my questions that I wrote and responses. And so the last, we had one last lunch where he said, I think you're good to go. So I had decided that I would like to be baptized in Aliquippa Church. It was a church I attended. Midland and Aliquippa were the two churches in Pennsylvania that I was most familiar with early on in our relationship. The priest there was someone very special to me. And that's kind of where I wanted to be baptized. And I didn't know that that was going to be sort of a big deal too, because generally you are baptized in the church that you will attend or that you are currently attending. But we got that worked out, so it was okay that Father Stepanoff baptized me. And so we selected a weekend where Milisha was able to travel in another car because we weren't telling David anything. And we got up there, and Father Stepanoff and his beautiful wife Anna have us for dinner. And oh, Father Milisha's in town. What do you think about that? Well, anyway, we all were at their home, the parish house, the priest's home, and having a dinner, and then Father Stepanoff says, I want to show you guys something in the parish, the chapel. And so he said, come on, David Ginger. Milisha, you come too, you probably. So there we are, and he baptized me.
Beautiful. Can you tell me from perspective, you have both perspectives, the Orthodox and the Baptist. What are the differences as far as not just the ritual, but commitments and whatever you can share?
You know, it's been a long time now for me to really answer that question, because I was so much younger when I was growing up Baptist, and even, you know, before I married David, I was still going to church. It was easier for me, of course, to understand everything, because there was all English. Now there's so much Slavonic, and, you know, sometimes I lose track. But there's enough English that, you know, it fills my heart, that I've enjoyed. I really pay attention to the sermon, you know. That's the one part that's very, very important to me. The reading and then the sermon.
Thank you for sharing. Do you mind giving us a quick rundown where you were born, where you grew up, and just a little bit about you?
Yeah.
Because somehow you always, and
I'm
David's shadow. So let's introduce you for a second.
Okay, I was born in the very, very southwestern tip of Virginia, coal mining territory. And my dad was in the service, the Army, actually stormed Normandy. Important that when he came back, my father was educated in Chicago, Northwestern University, on the GI Bill of Rights. And when he graduated as an electrical engineer, he came back to Virginia and gathered my mother and me, and we moved to Arlington, Virginia, when I was 5 years old at the time. So I was really raised right in this community, Arlington, Alexandria. I went to school in Richmond. The school was West Hampton, and I was going to become an electrical engineer. I didn't quite finish, but I got pretty far. And so I went to work after that for a company. It was called General Kinetics, and they manufactured computers, printed circuit board. Dropout detector was our main piece of equipment. But so I drew electrical schematics for a couple of years. And even though my father was an engineer and he was saying to his oldest daughter, you're not going anywhere. I was a woman in the 60s. I wasn't going anywhere. I could see that. So my father encouraged me to get out and do something different. And one day I was in a restaurant, lucked out. There's a guy sitting near me, we started talking, and he asked me about my career, and I told him, and he said, I have a contact on the Hill. And I go, you do? He goes, they're looking for somebody, a couple people, and actually, it was Senator Harry Byrd of Virginia, and he only hired Virginians. So he said, my father is the administrative assistant. Back then, that was the term for chief of staff.
Okay.
So his father was a man by the name of Colonel Forrest Redkers, never forget him, and the son arranged for an interview for me, and I got the job. And I started working for Senator Harry Byrd, and I stayed with him for 7 years, and I moved over to the House side, and I was there for the rest of my term.
Till retired, yeah.
Actually, I was working for the local congressman here, Stan Paris, and he lost his election in 1990. And the first George Bush, was president at that time. And President Bush appointed Stan Paris, the congressman, to be the chief executive officer of the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway administration, which was a part of transportation. And Stan took me with him. And I started out at that job doing congressional liaison, director of congressional liaison. But I was promoted, I always say, when I learned the pointy end was the bow of the ship, when I learned the maritime trade, and I did, and I was proud of myself because I was much older then. But I learned it, and I became director of trade development. And I really, what a job. I mean, it was fascinating. I got to travel the world. And then I retired after 10 years, I retired there. And one of the guys I worked with since 1987, he and I started our own little business out in McLean, and we just closed that down in December of 22.
Oh,
So we
okay.
did that for 22 years. 2022. Did that for 20 years. And, you know, it's been an amazing life for both of us. You know, we just thank God every day for this huge life we've had together, you know. And I never went anywhere in this world that David didn't give me a name and a phone number of somebody to call, to take care of me if I needed it, to have a drink, to have a meal. Never anywhere. In fact, I met Father John Takahashi in Tokyo because he said, you got to go meet him. Winnipeg, Calgary. Oh, and I spent a weekend with Brazzo in Rome.
Yeah.
Because David, I was flying in on a Saturday morning and David wasn't getting there until Saturday evening. And so he arranged for his friend
Brazzo Ceran.
to come meet me, entertain me, till he got there on Sunday.
Oh, beautiful.
And when Ginger put together, she organized her first international waterway and canal consortium meeting in London. Ginger told a story about a young gentleman came over to her and asked her about her name, and Ginger said it's Serbian, and the gentleman says, I'm Greek, and he says, I'm proud to know you, but I have to keep you close to me because the Turks are sitting over there.
I'm not going to let them. No, we've been so fortunate.
You had a house on the water too.
Yes,
Yeah.
we had it for 30 years.
And you said you learned all these marine terminology. Maybe you had a boat too, or you just had a house next?
We were really seriously thinking about investing in a nice boat down there. The problem is we were both traveling at the time. We were never home. We just got the weekends down there.
We had a great dock, though.
Yeah, but I told you earlier when we finished the house, most of the people that have a house on the Chesapeake, they put a name on their home because it's an estate. And I said, Ginger, we have to name the house. What do you want to name it? She said, Nasha Kucha. So we put that on our door, yeah. Nasha Kucha.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm going to switch a little bit back just to address your pinnacle of your career, the Apollo program that you were in. I think you designed. You were chiefly project manager for that emergency exit that it used to take like 2 minutes, and you cut it down to 3 seconds or something. Am I correct? Can you tell us about that?
That particular system, by the way, is a result of one of our Apollo failures. We lost 3 astronauts on Apollo 1, primarily as a result of the failure of the crew escape system at the time. The crew escape system at that time was developed by an MIT professor who worked for the naval shipyards in Groton, Connecticut, and he designed the escape hatch according to submarine technology, which opens inward rather than outward, as you can't blow the hatch out. So what happened when the first Apollo caught on fire, it took almost 90 seconds to even open the door. By that time, we had lost all 3 of the astronauts. The gentleman that redesigned, if you will, the space hatch, his name was Bojic, Danilo Bojic. He was from Koslin, from near Podgorica in Crna. He designed the escape hatch. And so we incorporated a new escape hatch in the next Apollo space capsule. We did several tests to determine whether or not we could reduce, if you will, the amount of time to blow the hatch away from the Apollo spacecraft itself. It took 3 seconds, as opposed to 90. So that was developed by Bojic. The docking systems, we hooked up with the lunar excursion module going to the moon. That was developed by a gentleman by the name of Milos Shirvatovich, and he was from Niš originally, I think. And so all of us had my responsibility during that time. I was responsible for what they call CDRs and PDRs, preliminary design review and critical design review of all the components, subsystems, and systems to determine how we can establish a mean time between failure of all of these systems, subsystems, and components in what we considered a simulated outer space environment, because we've never been there before. So that was my program, and I worked 24/7, met with a lot of the astronauts on a monthly basis, but it was a very exciting program. Our president of our division at the time, his name was Harrison Storms, who I just had the highest regard for. He and Milo Kovucevic became very close, and Storms depended on Mike in seeing that the design characteristics of the Apollo program were in concert and met all of the specifics of NASA, and they became very close. And Harrison Storms, on occasion, you can hear him speaking Serbian because Mike was teaching everybody how to speak Serbian, including the astronauts. And I remember one time we were having a meeting in one of our conference rooms, and one of our systems was behind schedule. We had several astronauts complaining, and Mr. Storms was there, and he got up and started screaming dirty Serbian words. And Mike is sitting over here.
What'd I do?
But nevertheless, you know, I like to think that we made an impact on the aerospace industry, because if you look back again, we had our own little consortium. The other gentleman was by the name of Veljko Gašić. Veljko Gašić was considered one of the top aerodynamicists in the country. He developed the F-5, the T-38, the B-2 bomber for Northrop. Okay. And Veljko was a Herzegovac, and you can tell he's about 6'99", you know, but he is a close personal friend. We used to get together with Veljko, with this guy from Peter Gajic, worked for a company that designed the engine cowlings for engines. So we had about 10 or 12 of us to go out at least once a month. We found a Serbian restaurant in Hollywood called Dantana's. We go up and have Sadama, and he'd bring a Tamburica group. But we had a lot of fun. There were a lot of us in the aerospace industry. Yeah. But the Apollo program was probably one of the most delightful programs I've ever worked in the aerospace industry. And I spent over 40 years in the industry. I retired as an aviation aerospace executive over those years, working in Canada and overseas and what have you. But the Apollo program brought the new dynamic of technology to the world, as Vladimir would certainly appreciate all of what we're dealing with today. You can go back to the Apollo program, and that's where it all started, because we had nothing to deal with at the time. But we had a specific series of schedule commitments to NASA to see to it that the spacecraft would fly at certain periods of time. And we met pretty much all of those. We started out, we were hiring when we first received the contract in 1962, primarily as a result of President Kennedy recognizing that the Soviets had just launched their second Sputnik. Finally, someone decided we need to do something about this. That's when President Kennedy put the program together and awarded the contract to our company, North American Aviation. The other very important person in this scenario was Wernher von Braun, because Wernher von Braun brought all of the propulsion technologies to this program. He also was a visionary in suggesting to President Kennedy that here is my program to take a man to the moon. So it was very exciting to be in the midst of all of these visionaries who started in 1962 with virtually nothing to put a man on the moon in 1969. Think how fast the technology exploded.
That is amazing to me. I was going to ask you, so the Soviets were ahead of the Americans
correct.
at the time, and you caught up, and how, from this perspective especially, right, you can go back and maybe look at some things differently. How was that race? Was it part of your job or not, or were you looking over what they were doing? Were you, I don't know, whatever you can share would be greatly. They didn't have a, or did they? I don't know.
Well,
A program to send a man to the moon.
they did not at the time. As a matter of fact, our first program was a joint program with the Soviets. It was called the Apollo-Soyuz program, where we sent both Americans and Russian cosmonauts up and out of orbit and returned.
What year is this?
Excuse me?
What year is this?
What year was?
I think that was 1967, 68.
So even though it was Cold War, you worked with Soviets on
Yes.
on these
Yes.
things
Yeah.
as friends, or not. I'm just curious to.
Yeah, we had a number of cosmonauts in our building almost every month, and we were numbers on our team that were learning the Russian language. Also, we were going to school. Mila spoke some Russian. I spoke a little bit of Russian, so we had an opportunity to interface with the Russian cosmonauts at the time.
So in your opinion, what was the main contribution? How did it? What happened that Americans were able to surpass the Russians and send man to the moon?
Well, we concentrated on the area of spacecraft development and all of the various technologies associated with state-of-the-art computer systems. How do we monitor all of the technical aspects of the program? How do we hook up with our lunar excursion model on our way to the moon? How do we? And the Soviets weren't that far. They didn't, and so we were looking to share that with them at the time, because during that period, they did surpass us in propulsion systems. Their rocket engines were better than what we had at the time. That's why over the years we even used the Russians to send our astronauts, to the moon or to the International Space Station. So.
Interesting. So when I was a kid, I heard, or I don't remember what book, I think somebody read this to me. When we landed on the moon, that the astronauts heard this voice that says, "Why did you come here? I told you I would come to you." Have you heard those stories? No.
I never heard that.
Have they? I mean, you met them personally. Have they told you anything that's I don't know, that's something that would be interesting to share?
Well,
as far as their feelings.
One of the questions that comes up quite frequently. I remember when I was briefing the general public in Belgrade. I was at Omladina, downtown, and I was going into the auditorium. This woman grabbed me and she pulled me aside and she said, "Laj." I said, "Okay, fine." But I went and I made they did a fantastic movie presentation of the Apollo launch, and then I answered an awful lot of questions. The question always comes up: is it true that you landed on the moon? And if so, how is it that those guys could take pictures and you can't see anybody holding the camera? I said, very simply. I said, when Neil Armstrong stepped off the ladder, we had already embedded a camera on the ladder door for that reason, to get him coming out of the spacecraft and that. I said, when they were meeting each other on the ground floor of the moon, the cameras were embedded in their spacesuits because they have big gloves. They can't operate a camera, so they just push the button. That's how those He said, we had no idea. So there were a lot of questions like that. And I remember at one point I was briefing the young men and women at the Astronomy Institute in Belgrade, and a question came up: Did your program ever have any concerns about the environmental aspects of which you're committing to. I said, yes, we did. I said, I'll give you a perfect example of which you people as astronomers will appreciate. The fact that we've never been in orbit for any length of time. We had no idea if there was some sort of meteoric debris or some type of debris out there that would impact the spacecraft, destroy it, or whatever the case may be. So, so we looked around, all of us, a couple of astronauts and our engineers, and said, well, do we know what's out there that may damage the spacecraft? And no one came up with an answer. So finally, one of our young engineers said, I think we need to call the folks that represent, astronomy dynamic, because we don't understand. They study the stars, they know what's out. So the next time we brought an astronomer in, and we told them we had a concern about launching the spacecraft at any given time, hopefully avoiding collision with meteorites or meteors or whatever have you. And the astronomer was very clear, and he said, do not launch late August, 11th and 10th of August. So we looked at each other and said, okay, why not? He said, that is the period of the Perseid. The Perseid represents one of the largest, what they call meteor showers during the year. It always happens during that period. He said, I would suggest you not launch at that time. But those types of things that we were confronted with, there were so many unknowns, So we asked a lot of questions. We had to bring in the experts. And sometimes the experts come from environments that we had no relationship with. It's incredible.
That's right.
So
I was learning that the radiation that comes out of space to Earth we're protected by atmosphere and by these Van Allen's rings, I think they're called, which is, for the lack of my understanding, it's some kind of radiation that repels radiation. Was that an issue for the astronauts to get through it?
No, because once you reach Earth's atmosphere, when you break through the atmosphere, then the spacecraft is on already established a trajectory to go straight toward the Earth, and there is no disturbance, and it's traveling at a very, very high rate of speed. Mm-hmm. The bottom deck of the spacecraft, we had to find a material that was heat resistant. Obviously no metal. We used ceramics. So the entire bottom deck of the spacecraft were ceramic blocks, about this thick, what have you. But you see the spacecraft on its approach in the Earth's atmosphere. You can see just nothing but a ball of fire until it finally comes into the outer atmosphere, and then it cools off, and then release the 3 chutes, and we end up in the ocean.
Going back to a little bit of your study that you haven't finished, music. You were a drummer in a band at some point.
I usually take offense to that.
Okay.
Drummer in the band colloquialism. I was actually a percussionist.
Okay.
So I played all of the percussion instruments, from the timpani to the bells to the chimes to the xylophones, whatever have you. I played in various symphonies throughout the United States. One of the symphony orchestras I played with was a tremendous, if you will, experience for me, and I rehearsed with the Los Angeles Philharmonic when Zubin Mehta was his conductor years ago. And I played with the Long Beach Symphony, the Orange County Symphony Orchestra, Omaha Symphony. But during that same period, and rest assured, I'm in the Air Force, or I'm still, on the airplane program. I'm doing all of this at night, okay? So, and I used to play with the various jazz groups in Los Angeles, and at the clubs and what have you. So I was I was at liberty to do that because I wasn't married at the time. So I had a lot of time, and I had befriended a lot of the well-known musicians in Hollywood, and I wanted to further study percussion. And at one time I received a notice to study with a gentleman by the name of Murray Spivak, who was a top percussionist in Hollywood, who received 2 Oscars, one for Spartacus and one for West Side Story. So I studied with him for several years, and I finally asked him because I knew he was very much involved in promoting his students to various Hollywood studios, play background music for movies and TV, and that's what I wanted to do, once I left the aerospace industry. So I very candidly asked him the question. I says, Mr. Spivak, once I reach a degree of proficiency here, do you suppose I may be considered to a position within the studio arena? He said, well, I said, what does it take to do that? He said, first of all, you need to stand in line, David. And secondly, you have to wait for the other guys to die. So I decided to keep my day job. But anyhow, I was very fortunate that I had the pleasure of working with some of the best jazz and philharmonic orchestras throughout the United States. And when I was in Serbia, I played Radio Television Belgrade with Duško Gojković and his jazz group, and we played a jazz festival in Kotor. We played a jazz festival in Istria at the Coliseum in Pula.
Okay.
And the keynotes, the vocalist there was a young lady that was incredible. Her name was Gabi Novak. She was an incredible vocalist. But I had the pleasure of playing a jazz festival there and in Kotor with Duško's group. But and then all of a sudden, I ended up playing with some Tamburica groups, and I've never done that before in my life. It was an accident.
That's what I saw. That's why I called you drummer in the band.
But I played for one event at the church in Los Angeles, and I remember this gentleman comes over, and I remember his name. His name was Pete Gospich. Pete comes up and he says, hey, with an accent, he says, Dave, I hear you play the bass. I said, yeah, I do. I said, I play jazz bass. I play with jazz. He said, can you play with tamboras? I said, I never did play, never. I couldn't play with tamboras. He says, very easy. That's easier than to play jazz. I said, well, I don't want to mess up. He said, don't worry, we need your help. I said, okay. I said, but I don't have a bass. He said, don't worry, we have bass for you. I played that one job at the church. Every weekend they're calling me.
I couldn't get it.
But it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Do you find yourself when these music frequencies, especially like in symphony orchestra or even jazz, do you find yourself closer to God? Those frequencies,
absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little?
I look at it in terms of this is a talent that was handed to me by our Lord. And I didn't want to disappoint him by walking away from it. So I wanted to pursue a career in the music industry, even though that didn't materialize as I hoped it would have. But it did materialize as much as I could under the circumstances, because when I came out of the Air Force, when I went from studying music to becoming a pilot, my career field changed 100%. All of a sudden became overwhelmed with this thing called aviation and aerospace. But I never gave up music. Yeah.
And singing in the choir, in church choir, when everything gets together, those frequencies take some people to, like, as apostles would say, I'm not sure if I'm in the heavens or in the earth. It is.
There are some choirs that I sang with. Our choir in Midland was incredible. The choir from South Chicago for years, I think it was the Branko Radicevic choir, but they were incredible. And just singing the Rukovets from the old Serbian composers like Vošnjaković, Mokranjac, and those guys, it's incredible music. I mean, even looking at what Tchaikovsky has written, you find a lot of the Serbian folk music in War and Peace, for example. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. But nevertheless, I was overwhelmed by, again, being a percussionist, the various rhythmic signatures in Serbian music is incredible, and a lot of jazz musicians went to Serbia just to learn how to do that, So
super
the one guy that I work with, I have his portrait on the wall over here. His name was Joe Pass. You probably never heard of him. Mm-hmm. Joe Pass was considered one of the foremost jazz guitar players in the country. Joe Pass was backed up some of the best jazz singers like Ella Fitzgerald and whatever have you over the years. But Joe Pass learned to play the guitar when he was a kid from his grandfather. His grandfather used to make tamburas. His mother was an Orlic. So he always told everybody, I'm Serbian, man. So he and I had a good time when we played a lot of jobs together.
I wanted to ask you also, you were obviously, after you switched and went into the engineering field, and we have Nikola Tesla behind, at the time, the scientists, the engineers, how were they looking? Were they talking about Tesla and Pupin, for example? Do you recall any of those?
Well, this last time when I was in Belgrade, I made a presentation to the Union of Serbian Scientists and Technicians. And I called on an astronaut, a friend of mine, and I asked him the exact question you just asked me. Can we attribute a certain amount of success of our spacecraft programs to Tesla? And he didn't even stop to think. He says, absolutely. I said, could you send me a formal letter? I want to present one to the University of Belgrade. I want to present one to the scientists and engineers as to what Tesla has contributed to the success of the space program, both Tesla and Pupin. He wrote some outstanding a letter, and if I find one, I'll give one to you. But the fact remains is, yes, we had one astronaut in particular who we became very good friends. His name was Gordon Cooper. Gordon Cooper is a success story in itself. He came from an Indian reservation in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Became an astronaut. He and I became very good friends. And after he retired from the astronaut business, I met him by surprise at a hotel in Paris where I was attending and participating in the Paris Air Show. So we had dinner together, and I said, Gordon, are you here to attend a Paris Air Show? He said, no, I had no idea what was going on. I said, yes, it is. He said, no. He says, I'm just passing through, but I'd love to go. So I got him a personal invitation from the president to attend the show. I said, this is a black tie affair. He said, I don't have a black tie. I said, these French are very good. You'll get a black tie and a limousine to go with it. You'll get it, which he did. But anyhow, I said, what have you been doing? He said, well, I have my own lab in a little town outside of San Diego where I have some support from several corporations, where I have actually researched some patents from an old scientist that was so far ahead of anything that we could even imagine, that all of a sudden it becomes applicable today in everything that we do. So I'm currently working on trying to develop and fully operate what they call a bladeless turbine engine technology. He said, you wouldn't know who the guy was, David. I said, try me. He said, his name is Tesla. I said, Gordon, I said, you've been running around with me and Mike Vucelic for years, and you forgot that we're Serbians. He goes, oh, yeah. But anyhow, I just give you some example that we had people in the astronaut corps. They all knew who Tesla and Pupin was. And of course, Pupin, you know, was the father of NASA. He's the one of, and back in 1913, he had already written a program for, it was called the Aeronautical something Association, which he was its first chairman and president and founder. And that same organization today is called NASA. So if you look at it in terms of what Serbia has contributed to the space industry and to the field of science and technology, Tesla and Pupin are right up front. And this last time when I was in Serbia, I made a proposal to several large corporations and the government over there to consider a Tesla Pupin Center for Space Technology. And they went crazy over that. So I am working now in conjunction with the Vice President of the U.S. Space Foundation. We just sent the proposal over there about a month ago. As soon as we receive an approval from Serbia, we'll take the whole delegation back to Serbia to assist, if you will, in introducing them to space programs to determine what available technology they have in Serbia that is applicable to the current Artemis space program. So we want to get them involved. We'd like to get them involved in the astronaut program, what have you. So that's our objective.
Excellent. Before I go back to Ginger, I want to ask you about Elon Musk and his SpaceX. Do you think he will make it all the way to Mars and send people up there?
Elon Musk is a very committed gentleman. He has probably the best possible scientists and engineers working in his organization. They have worked the system for years and years and years. Look at it in terms of what they've developed with respect to the propulsion system. Now we're saving propulsion systems, and they're returning, and they're landing themselves. I mean, that's highly unbelievable. Okay, to give you some idea as to his objective. He never walks away from a challenge. And his initial objective is to put together a colony on the moon. A colony on the moon would be designed specifically as a spaceport necessary to launch, if you will, future spacecraft from the moon to Mars and Venus and whatever. That was his idea.
You met him personally, right?
Yeah. And he's an incredible guy. So sometimes he gets a little wild, and sometimes, you know, scientists have a tendency to do that. But, you know, he has developed so much, it's unbelievable.
Is he more a scientist or a business person?
He's more a businessman, but he's also, you know, he got his PhD, I think, from Wharton in Philadelphia. But he's also, I think, either electrical or electronics engineer, I'm not sure.
So Ginger, tell us, how is it to be behind David and to support him, and what does it take for a woman? Obviously, what's the saying? There's no great man without great woman behind. So
that's correct.
So I want to pay tribute to you and some of the things that you had to sacrifice and that you had to invest to support David.
You know what? It's never been a sacrifice, and David never makes me feel like I'm behind. He's always giving me the same space. He always gives me credit for the things that I do to help. And I mean, I have been with him from the beginning with the Serbian cause. We started the first Sava, which we did for many years on our own, trying to get support here. And
the Mihailovich Monument.
The Mihailovich Monument, my God. I had that one done, but...
yeah, some other Serbs destroyed it for us.
No.
Yeah, we could have had a monument down on the lips, but somebody else
there were
got
many
involved.
frustrating episodes, when someone thinks that they want to outshine you, they want the credit,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care that that's happened a lot.
Yeah.
But we've moved on. We've done a lot of things with Serbian people, and I've helped to start the businesses like XCube and
Yeah.
some others. And this is all on our time. We're helping.
And what about now? Now that you retired, you sold a company 2 years ago, or
Mm-hmm.
2022. How do you spend time now? What do you do?
Gosh, what do? I take care of him. Well, I think you might know this, that David does have pancreatic cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And we have done this together, prayed a lot. And I really think he is going on 3.5 years now. They gave him 2. The faith. And God still has things for this man to do on this earth before he calls him home. But in the beginning, we spent hours, days researching, to get as knowledgeable about it as we possibly could. He'd take one subject, me another, and then we'd get our, talk about it. But we wanted to know as much as we could possibly know to make some informed decisions about some very, very, very serious surgery.
And we were looking for options, because the options that were presented to us were unacceptable. I wouldn't be talking to you today if we took one of the options that the surgeons suggested to us.
Mm-hmm.
I refused it. I'm here because of it. Yeah.
It's a good lesson.
But we did a lot of that. But on the other hand, David's always got some little something going, some project going, and I try to support, when I can, as much as I can. But, we've earned the right now to just enjoy our friends to whatever extent. That's what we try and do. We don't travel far because of some of the, I call them episodes that he's had. 14 to be exact, but who's counting, since he was diagnosed with the pancreatic cancer. And it meant he needed to be in an emergency room now.
Mm-hmm.
One time they told me he had 1 hour left if he hadn't gotten the treatment that he needed at that time. So it frightens us a bit. We stay close to home, but we go out to dinner, we go to lunch, we see our friends, and just a family. We don't have a big family here, but we've got a little girl we call her Little Sweet. She's going to be 18.
Call her Mala Slatka.
She's going to be 18 next week on the 26th of January. And she wants us to celebrate with her, which we are just delighted about that. And,
Nice.
so that's what we do.
I see a lot of giraffes in this house. Whose are those?
You haven't even begun to see the giraffes. They're mine.
What's that love? Where does it come from?
When I was working for Senator Byrd, many years ago now, we picked names and exchanged Christmas presents. And the person who got my name gave me a giraffe pin you wear on your sweater or your blouse. And everybody thought that was really funny because I'm so tall. I've shrunk a couple of inches, but I used to be 6 feet. So my birthday was in February, and they gave me a giraffe for my birthday present in that office. And this just kind of started going. I've not purchased one
So you received all of them.
They've all been gifts.
Oh my God.
All of them. I will show you around. I will open up our cabinets. I've got champagne glasses that have giraffes and martini glasses and salad tongs and you know,
Beautiful.
I think, what do you think? 500.
Yeah, at least.
500.
Nice. Is there anything that you wanted to share with our viewers that I haven't asked you?
Well, I first of all, I want to thank you personally and Vladimir for taking the time, your valuable time, to visit us in our home to conduct this interview. Appreciate an opportunity to be very candid in the manner in which we've responded to your questions, and at least allow those who would eventually view this interview of interest, my background and Ginger's background, and the fact that we are just overwhelmingly committed to our Orthodox Christianity. There are a lot of people that I'd like to thank. I'd like to express my sincere thanks to both Yelena as well as Father Vasilia. Years ago when he learned that, I was on the Apollo program, he immediately attempted to gain access to some sort of award for me, but found out later they'd already done that because I had no idea. I said, I have no idea. I told Father Vasilia, I said, I don't look for these kinds of things because I'm not the type of person that jumps in front of the camera. I try to get a job done. If I'm committed to something, I feel very good about my accomplishments. And as I suggested to you earlier, all of what we, both Ginger and I, have been able to accomplish in our lives of over 40 years is primarily as a result of our belief in our Lord Jesus Christ and our God. And we believe that, and we thank Him every day. We obviously haven't had the pleasure to attend the liturgy in the Potomac, but we're always watching it on streaming.
You are? Okay.
We never miss a Sunday.
Never.
Never.
We've missed 3.
Yeah,
3.
yeah. We're always watching it on
He's been
Sunday.
in the
We never miss it.
hospital.
So, that was it.
Thank you. Ginger, do you have anything you would like to add?
I can't really think of anything.
Thank you.
I can't. It's just, this was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine. Beautiful, an hour and a half that went literally like snap of a finger. So I appreciate you hosting us, and thank you so much.
Our
pleasure. Mnogo hvala.
Yeah.
Pog fella.
Yeah, this poster was given to me at the University of Belgrade. And as you can see, it includes, if you will, the Serbian astronauts. And I made presentation to the robotics laboratory in Serbia, at which time they named and renamed the robotics laboratory in my name. So it was an honor for me, as you can imagine. I have several awards that I received recently. This Lifetime Achievement Award from the Serbian National Federation, the Medal of Freedom from the Republic of Serbia, the Tesla Spirit Award. This is a Medal of Honor from the Grand Masonic Lodge of Belgrade in Serbia. This is the Medal of Honor from the Medal of Recognition from Milujko Savic. This is the award of Majka Srbija for humanitarianism. This was an honorary flag presented to me by the Embassy of Serbia. This is a Lifetime Achievement Award from a group called We Will Survive Cancer. Well, I was one of the original members of the board. These are awards from the Tesla Science Foundation. And this is actually a membership card where Tesla was the very first member of this organization, and I was the second, would you believe?
Yeah.
So it's an honorary award. And what you're looking here is a wonderful painting of Tesla. Over here is a photograph of the Apollo, the Serbian Apollo spacecraft team.
Okay.
And over here is a picture of me briefing very famous World War II general, General James Doolittle, behind the B-1 bomber. And here are some of the Apollo program insignia, the astronaut. Here, all of these aircraft here are airplanes that I either flew or I worked research on. Again, this is the B-1 bomber here. The XB-70 flew at 3 times the speed of sound back in 1958. Also the shuttle program. These aircraft I sold to the FAA for flight inspection. All of these aircraft here were Avions Marcel Dassault aircraft that we sold to the U.S. Coast Guard. And the one here was sold to the government of Yugoslavia back in 1980 as a VIP transport. Over here on this wall is my early pilot wings. These wings here were given to me by the test pilot school in Finland. And this is a gift to me from Sokolmostar, where they were building the Orao years ago, back in the 1970s. And all of this library in here are books about Orthodox religion or Serbian history. And of course, this is me when I was a young pilot in the Air Force. And the gentleman next to me is General Mile Vojvodic, who was the first test pilot on the SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft, which is a aircraft that flies 3 times the speed of sound.
I'm getting out of here.
And here's another Lifetime Achievement Award I got in Belgrade from the Union of Scientists and Technicians. A certificate from my cousin, who was the first woman elected to the state senate in the history of California, Senator Roseanne Vujic. Yep, and this is my father here, Mitar Vujic. This is my uncle David, Stric David, Stric Bogdan. It's my grandfather, Lazo. I had 3 more uncles, but they didn't have photographs of them. This was presented to me by the Serbian Shield of Canada when I spoke at the Ryerson University Convention of Serbs. This is when I received, I was on the board of directors of a hospital in Los Angeles many years ago.
I don't even know how to start
Just tell me,
explaining these.
they were all gifts to you.
Yeah.
All of these giraffes were gifts to me over the years. Not one has been purchased. Some are very, very unusual, like the teapot right here, the giraffe teapot. You know, I love this. Just a really nice little box. A friend many years ago made this one for me. That was a Christmas present.
How about that big one over there?
David gave that one to me.
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah. And this one's like a flower vase.
This icon here came from an antique store in Budapest. Ginger found it, and she presented it to me for my birthday years ago. The interesting thing is, had a little crack in it, so we had to have it repaired. And I asked the iconologist the value of the icon, and he said it's priceless. We have no idea where it came from, but it's absolutely gorgeous. This one came from Russian church, and unfortunately it's starting to fall apart, but we've had it for years. This one was done by my nephew of St. Sava. He did this and this one, and they're both ceramics. They're not paint, it's
The one
ceramic.
that's coming to Atlanta?
Yeah. And this is the one that Ginger received from the Greek shipping industry when she was over in Athens. So, and this one here of Christoph Dan was given to me by Bishop Chrysostom when he was in Los Angeles many years ago, where I assisted him in gaining access to his secretary's transfer to the United States. This one here, Ginger, she received this one in Cyprus, and it's actually the story of St. George. So this one over here, you're seeing here the alphabet in gold print, was given to me by the Minister of Transport of Serbia. And of course the one on top was given to me by some friends.